Hello, Kidney Warriors! James here from Dadvice TV, your online kidney health coach, and this is Dadvice TV Live. Now, for those that are joining us for the very first time, welcome. Great to have you here. Make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button over on YouTube. You're definitely going to want to know whenever we have new content coming up, which is every single week. Now, if you are new, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is James. I am a kidney warrior, diagnosed with stage 5 kidney disease and told I had no hope and that I needed dialysis. Well, guess what? My doctor was wrong. I started exercising. I started eating better. I got my blood pressure under control, and I focused on my overall health. And my labs, along with my health, started to improve. Now, my kidneys, they're still shot. There's no fixing that. They're not going to fix themselves, but I have no symptoms. I feel great, and I like to say, I'm kicking kidney disease to the curb. Now, tonight, we've got a brand new co-host, first time here on Dadvice TV, and we are going to talk about polycystic kidney disease, plus something very special from a company that he founded and is the president of that is nutritional based and that may be able to help slow the progression of kidney disease with people who have polycystic kidney disease. So let's go ahead and we're going to give a great big giant Dadvice TV welcome to a professor from UC Santa Barbara. I had to read it to make sure I got it right because I keep wanting to say UCLA, but just a little bit north of that, UC Santa Barbara. Also, the president and founder of Santa Barbara Nutrients, Dr. Thomas Weimbs. Hey, Doc.
Hey, James. Glad to be with you and your viewers. It's really terrific. I'm a fan of your show. I told you that already. So I think you're, spreading great information. Wonderful. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. My day job is I'm a professor at the University of California in Santa Barbara, as you mentioned. I've been, running a research lab for 20 plus years, focused on polycystic kidney disease, or PKD for short. We have been working on, all kinds of mechanistic work, trying to understand the disease better. Most recently, we found that dietary interventions turn out to be highly effective in the disease. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about this, but we actually ended up founding a company to make products available that kind of like exploit this and these mechanisms, if you will. For the benefit of people with PKD and potentially many other kidney diseases as well. And that keeps me busy. By day, I'm a professor. By night and weekends, if you will, I'm helping this company along. And it's been a big learning curve for me and, active and a lot of fun.
Awesome. And our backgrounds, we both used to live in the same place or close to the same country. Because my dad's military, I got to travel all around the world. Where are you from? I recognize the accent. I don't know if everyone else does.
Yes, I don't seem to be able to lose the accent. I do lose my original German language, though. Yes, I'm from Germany, Cologne in Germany. Yes, I seem to be stuck with the accent, so no way around it.
Oh, that's awesome. I lived in Ramstein, Germany during the 80s. My favorite place in the entire world that I have lived, even better than Southern California, down where you live now. Now, let's talk a little bit about polycystic kidney disease to kind of kick things off. What is the difference between polycystic kidney disease and just chronic kidney disease?
Right. Yeah, great question. So polycystic kidney disease or PKD, is essentially a form of chronic kidney disease or CKD. There are many different reasons why somebody can develop CKD. As you know, one of them is a genetic defect, and that happens in PKD. There can be one of two genes if they are mutated. it leads to the disease eventually. But really, the progression of the disease is very similar. Whether you have chronic kidney disease due to diabetes or hypertension or polycystic kidney disease, at the end of the day, the progression is, kind of similar. It's slowly progressive, relentlessly progressive, eventually leading to, lower and lower kidney function, and eventually requiring dialysis or kidney transplantation. So that's in that sense, PKD is sort of a genetically determined form of CKD, if you will.
And what is the difference as far as like as a person? I didn't know I had kidney disease. I had really no symptoms until the very end when my kidneys were failing. Are there symptoms for PKD?
They're very similar between CKD and PKD. The one difference I would say is that most people with PKD know about it, for a long time because it's a genetic disease. It's inherited, so they would have typically inherited from one of their parents. About 85% of the cases are, the patient inherits it from one of their parents. So they have most likely seen, one of their parents, maybe a grandparent, maybe other relatives already suffering from the disease. So it's kind of on their radar, and it's much less often of a surprise as it oftentimes is for people with other forms of CKD. So typically, patients can get diagnosed much earlier on. They know they have about a 50% chance, or exactly a 50% chance of getting the disease. And they would, if symptoms come up, the doctors would already suspect what it is and, can easily diagnose it.
And with the polycystic kidney disease, they're growing cysts on there. So are they more likely to get that lower back pain?
Yeah, so that's maybe one of the biggest differences is the organs, the kidneys, they get really, really large. And, it depends. It's different for every patient. Sometimes they get, somewhat large, but sometimes like very, very large. And if that happens, of course, it's, clear what happens, right? So there's only so much room. And, these big organs, they just squeeze everything, compress everything, push nerves, and so on. So there can be different kinds of pain for sure. And as you know, a normal kidney is usually the size of a fist of a person. So you have two of those inside inside your belly. In polycystic kidney disease, they can become like football size, let's say. So imagine having two footballs in there. That can make a big difference.
And when it comes to treating polycystic kidney disease, with at least with mine, a lot of it was I had to stop taking the non-steroid anti-inflammatories. I had to get my blood pressure under control and keep it under control. Is it similar with polycystic kidney disease, or is the treatment different?
It's actually very similar. Blood pressure, that's one of the symptoms that actually happens very early on, also in PKD. There's some studies showing that, if you can regulate this with blood pressure medication, this actually helps with the disease progression. So typically, patients with PKD are on blood pressure medication. And then everything else is sort of, very similar to, treating people with CKD. There's one drug only out there, one FDA-approved drug that is specifically approved for polycystic kidney disease. And that is a drug that it's called tolvaptan or Junaq, that sort of makes people pee a lot, if you will, and consequently drink a lot. So you have a lot of urine volume going through. It's been shown to, somewhat slow the progression of the disease. It does not stop it, and let alone reverse it. So even on this drug, one would still progress towards renal failure. But at least in some patients, it slows down the progression.
Now, in your research, you've found ways to slow down polycystic kidney disease, correct? Using diet or something related to diet?
Mhm. Yeah, so as I mentioned, in my lab that I direct, we have been doing research on PKD for 20 plus years, and looked at all kinds of molecular mechanisms. First you need to understand something about the disease before you can start doing something about it, and we've done this over the years. Come up with some drug treatments. For example, one example is mTOR inhibitors, such as rapamycin. It doesn't matter what it is, but this was kind of like early work of what we did. And of course, this is all initially done using animal models, usually mouse models. So we have mice that develop polycystic kidney disease, and we can try to treat them and see if it works. And it worked fantastic in those mice with this class of drugs, which we published. It led to clinical trials, and unfortunately, it didn't really work in people with polycystic kidney disease. And in hindsight, the problem is that these drugs are essentially too strong and too non-specific. They work not only on the kidneys but on all the tissues and cells in the body. And so you end up with all kinds of extra renal side effects and toxicities. So a patient would just drop out of the study because they have all kinds of additional problems in addition to the kidney disease that they're suddenly getting. So this was a bit of a dead end. However, what we most recently found, in the last few years is that dietary interventions can actually sort of like, or I should back up. So maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, it has become clear that polycystic kidney disease is really a metabolic disease, sort of on the cellular level, where these cells that form the cysts that they keep on growing, they have a metabolic defect, and they're sort of locked into using sugar. Right? So they love sugar, blood sugar, essentially glucose. And they cannot properly metabolize another energy source, which is fatty acids or ketones, because of that defect. So these cells happily grow and divide and become bigger and bigger cysts if they have plenty of sugar around.
Which are most diets are pretty high in sugar.
Right, exactly. So all of us, Americans and pretty much worldwide these days, we eat high carbohydrate diets. We have plenty of carbs everywhere. 50+% of the energy that we're eating comes from carbohydrates. Sometimes it's even much more than that. Which means that our blood sugar levels are always high, highish, if you will. And that keeps these cells happy, and we don't want them to be happy, or we want them to be unhappy and go away, of course.
Not fat and happy and getting fatter.
Right. Yeah. So one thing we found is that, so initially, what we found was that, if you take these mice with polycystic kidney disease and you just give them less food, miraculously, their progression of the cystic kidney disease stops and actually reverses. So there was
and it also doesn't just stop; they kind of regain the cysts shrink.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that was very surprising to find, and it was kind of based on almost like a bit of a crazy experiment that was done by a grad student in my lab, who for some mechanistic reasons thought, hey, if I feed them less food, this particular pathway we were interested in should be less active, so this might be beneficial. So he just did it. I don't even recall he asked me about it. So I would probably have said, hey, no way this is going to work, forget it. But luckily I wasn't consulted, if you will. So he just did it, fed these animals less food, only 23% less food. So, very mild reduction in food
Yeah,
intake.
not a big reduction. Did
No,
he
exactly.
increase their activity level, or was it just a reduction in the food only?
That's it. Same food. The food didn't change. The standard rodent chow, which is actually sort of a high carbohydrate, kind of, these little grains that you feed
Yep.
them. And so you put them on this 23% food reduction, and one day comes with some data and says, "Whoa, hey, I did this. It works." Enormous effect on the kidney growth. So we were scratching our heads, and of course, had to documenting everything, measuring all kinds of
Yep.
parameters, and repeating things, having controls, and so on. And it was very clear. Published the paper, I think that was back in 2016, and we essentially published saying, exactly what we found. You put PKD mice on a reduced food intake regimen, it greatly improves their disease, and we have no idea why. So that was kind of the paper.
Yep.
And then yeah, and since then we had, of course, we wanted to know why it's working, what's going on
Exactly.
there, right? So since then we had worked on that, and figured, so an interesting observation was that these mice, the way you reduce their food intake is by just weighing out some food and putting it into the cage, like a defined amount of food. And you do this once a day. You weigh out the food, put in the cage, and they suddenly behave actually very different from the ad libitum control. So ad libitum means the control mice, they can just eat whenever they want, however much they want, and they eat just all day, all night long, a little bit here and there.
Yep.
But in reduced food intake, you put it into the cage once a day, they gobble up all the food pretty much within 1 hour, and then it's gone. And then for
So
the
then they're like
remaining 23
fasting the
hours,
rest of the time?
what's that?
Are they fasting the rest of the time until the next
Exactly.
day, the next feeding?
Exactly right. So they eat for an hour, the food is gone, they eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at once, and then for the remaining 23 hours, they're actually fasting. And that turned out to be the key that this makes all the difference. And as you know, when we, or when mice or rats or cats or dogs, when we're fasting, after some time our body metabolism changes, right? So because we can only store like a certain limited amount of carbohydrates in our bodies, once it's tap into another resource for energy, and that is the fat tissue.
Yep.
So we start burning fat after some time, and that only happens, after
This
the
is
carbs
sounding
are
very
gone.
familiar. This is sounding like a keto diet.
Exactly right. Right. So, and that's what happened in those mice. They actually go into ketosis for about half of the 24-hour daily period. And then you feed them again, they crash out of ketosis, they go back into ketosis, so they're cycling in and out of ketosis. And we could show that we can induce ketosis by other measures as well, like a ketogenic diet, like a high-fat, low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet, and it works just as well, if anything, even better. We can do acute fasting, where we just stop giving them any food, for a certain period of time, and that had beneficial effects as well. So this was kind of amazing to see that just a very simple dietary intervention can be so effective. So yeah, and
Now,
of
did you
course,
try this? My mom asked a great question. Have you tried this on people yet?
oh yes, of course, a very good question. So we published the results, in a paper in the scientific literature a couple of years ago. Mostly with animal experiments. We actually did this on mice, we did this on rats, we did this even on cats with polycystic kidney disease. And same result throughout, which is always good. If multiple models of the same disease, the same intervention, you get results that all agree with each other. That gives us some confidence that this may also hold true in another species of animals, which is us humans. And we had some clinical data in there. There's actually a lot of clinical data suggesting that high carb diets make this disease worse. So people didn't really necessarily realize it, but I think it's very clear if you look at the sum of the clinical data, it's pretty clear that high carbohydrate diets and sort of the avoidance of ketosis makes the disease worse and makes the progression worse. And as soon as we publish those data, of course, patients are very smart. They follow the literature. They're reading papers.
Exactly. I'm doing the same thing. I'm reading these published papers, and I'm looking for I hate when it says more research needed, but I know that just means, hey, more people try this. Let's see what's there. But I love reading it and trying to figure it out. Like, hey, is there something there?
Right. Yeah. And, lots of people started, paying attention to it, reading the papers. And I think from that moment on, a lot of people also said, okay, it's just a dietary change. There's no harm in just trying it. Let me try it. And so we actually kind of reasoned that, okay, ketogenic diets are very commonly used just in normal lay people, if you will. Polycystic kidney disease is very common. Maybe there is a subset of people with polycystic kidney disease that have already experimented with ketogenic diets. So we, started recruiting essentially, and asking mostly through social media, but also through the PKD Foundation. Hey, if you have polycystic kidney disease and you have experience with ketogenic diets, raise your hand and participate in a clinical study that we did. And this was done by a really terrific nephrologist in my lab, Sebastian Struble. So he did this study, found 131 patients with polycystic kidney disease that had experience with ketogenic diets, did long questionnaire and phone interviews with them. He got additional, health data from them from their doctors and so on. Put all the results and all the data together in what's called a case series study, right? So once you have, a number of cases, it becomes a case series. And to our amazement, found that, the vast majority of people with PKD on a ketogenic diet reported really interesting improvements in their symptoms. Lots of, of course, weight loss.
Yep.
And, people that were obese went down to the overweight category. People that were overweight went down to the normal weight category and so on. And improvements in pain level. And that makes a lot of sense. If we're losing abdominal fat, that frees up space,
Yep.
which is obviously what you would want to do if you have these football-sized polycystic kidneys in there as well. So pain reduction, reduction in many other symptoms that are typical for people with PKD, including actually hypertension. So there was a very big reduction in hypertension.
Yeah, with the weight loss, that's common. Reduction in hypertension. Yeah.
And especially ketogenic diets are actually pretty well documented to be very effective in reducing blood pressure. So we saw that. And even, about half or so of the patients had data on their kidney function from, before and after doing the ketogenic diet. And even there was an improvement. So that was very surprising to me to see it so clear cut. And then there were lots of, questionnaires, and we asked them, how feasible do you think the diet is? Do you recommend it to your, to family members and so on? And people were generally very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, and I did a keto diet for a while. And I tell you, I loved the results. I dropped weight. Oh my goodness, it was awesome. And then one day, I know the day, it was Halloween. I was giving out candy, It all
Oh yeah.
didn't get given out. And
Came crashing in.
that was the crash of my keto diet. And then it was
Right.
just so difficult to get back into ketosis. And I just never really made it. And I
Right.
put on so much of that weight, came back.
Right.
And now I'm
You
trying to
know,
I'm looking at reducing carbs to get back to that.
right. Yeah. There's actually a lot of tricks, and I completely understand what you're talking about. If you, let's say you're a doctor and you tell a patient, lose weight, and come back in 6 months and show me what you got, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to work? No, it's not going to work, right? So just like some general advice, like reduce your portion size and exercise more, never works, right? It maybe works in 5% of the people or so. I think it's really important to have have tools and have guidance and direction, competent guidance and direction, of course, to actually see this through and be able to come up with a kind of a lifestyle change that somebody can stick to. Otherwise, it's a short-lived thing. You can do this
Yeah.
for 2 weeks, maybe a month, and then it's over again. And that's actually one of the the main reason why we have also set up a dietary program for people with polycystic kidney disease. It's called the Renew program. So Renew for renal nutrition, or it rhymes with renew.
There you go. It's an awesome name.
Yeah, so this came about actually by lots of coincidence and a very lucky circumstance. Turns out there's a really fantastic renal dietitian by the name of Jessiana Saville, who
Hey,
Jess
I know her very well. She's been
Yes.
here on Dadvice TV.
And Jess is really terrific. She leads a group of renal dietitian in a company called Kidney RD. They're all treating people virtually, in kind of like virtual visits and so on. And they're really terrific. They operate throughout the US. And Jess knows, all about kidneys and all about nutrition. She knows her metabolic pathways, backwards and forwards. And she knew about our research, had read our papers, had heard, I think, from some patients about it as well. And one day was coming to Los Angeles to visit family, and essentially just emailed me and said, hey, can I stop by Santa Barbara, and I want to talk to you. And so I said, whoa, that sounds great. So we chatted and came up very quickly with this idea to essentially set up a dietary program that would incorporate all of the latest research, from my lab, from many other labs, kind of put it all together. Everything that has to do with dietary changes and seems to have really good rationale, scientific rationales for being beneficial. Kind of put it all together. And worked on this for at least a year, and came up with this program, which essentially is a plant-focused ketogenic diet. And plant-focused and ketogenic diet seems to be a contradiction, right? Because most people.
That was my biggest challenge. Was you're eating. It's easy to go to bacon and all the meat, but then your pH is all off. You're stressing your kidneys. It's so difficult. And that was my most challenging part of doing a ketogenic diet. But I was on my own. I didn't have a program like this with a dietitian to help me, especially one who understands plant-based and all the benefits it brings.
Yeah. And I think that's, usually ketogenic diets I think they're very beneficial for most people. And, but there are internet versions of it, which is, one would find, if you Google ketogenic diet, out come those that are very, very meat heavy, of course. For people with kidney disease, that can become a problem. And you don't want to eat necessarily meat all day long,
right?
For a number of reasons that we can get into. So there was one big motivation to come up with a kidney-safe version of a ketogenic diet and make it much more plant-focused. And it's not a vegan diet, so there's still animal fats, for example. There's still some fish and some dairy in there, because a vegan diet is very, very difficult to do. It's very easy to
Oh yeah.
become nutrient deficient in certain micronutrients and so on. So Jess and her team really came up, I think, with a fantastic solution. And that's all based on their clinical experience, treating people with chronic kidney disease for many, many years, knowing what works, what doesn't work, and so on. And they also have a very strong educational component. They had always done this anyway, kind of like remote teaching of their patients in how to do things. And, they know how to write up recipes and send them over to patients and so on. So this Renew program has now launched in January officially with it's sort of in a class setting. So there's classes of about 20 people at a time. They go through the whole program together, and it's a 3-month program. So it's pretty, it takes a while to go through it. But I think that's kind of what it takes to actually learn all of this, to learn, how to read food labels and how to throw away all the stuff that you have in your pantry. And
that's the first step. You got to get rid of all the bad, and then you also need your family on board. Just before our show, I was filling up my water in the kitchen. There are boxes of Girl Scout cookies, so I'm guessing they're being delivered now. Big old bag of Oreos. I passed them all up. I did good. But there's temptation. And when the temptation's out of the house, it's so much easier to stick to the diet. It's difficult. Even if I know that's sugar and it's bad for me, I have to fight the urge. And I know in the middle of the night, getting up, I'm going to know there's boxes of Thin Mints. So hopefully my wife will hide them and not tell me where they are.
Perfect. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's very important, but it also makes it difficult because there are like social situations, you go to the cafeteria at work, you go to dinners and lunches and over to people's houses. So it's hard to navigate. And that's all actually part of the Renew program, is to learn how to navigate all these things. And, and I think people really did extremely well. So we had actually beta tested the whole program. So we had about 24 people with polycystic kidney disease that went through the whole curriculum, before it was officially launched, and went through the entire program. And we got fantastic feedback from them. I think that they told us, okay, this works fantastic, this is great, here you can tweak something. So that really helped. But everybody was extremely positive about it and felt that this really helps them understand why one should not eat this and do eat this and change that. Because if you just tell people, do it without them knowing why, I think it just doesn't last as long.
Exactly.
If somebody really understands, hey, oxalate is bad for you, and it's in spinach and it's in almonds and in this and this, I think that makes a big difference.
Now, all of this is so exciting, and it may help motivate me to go back onto a keto diet because I need to lose weight, and the weather's getting nicer. I'm going to start walking some more. But for someone who doesn't have polycystic kidney disease, do you believe a keto diet may be able to also help them?
Yes, I think so. There's probably only very few people out there for which maybe ketogenic diet is not appropriate, and those people would typically already know this. There's some very rare metabolic diseases that are just not very compatible with ketogenic diets. For everybody else, it's probably going to be beneficial for all kinds of things. And as you know, we humans, we didn't just pop on Earth, like 100 years ago. we have been around, and our ancestors have been around actually for millions of years, if you will, right? So depending on from where you start counting, the early hominids and so on, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, right? So they did not live in beautiful homes with refrigerators, and they didn't have
They didn't eat all day long.
and they didn't eat all day long. Exactly. And that's the point. So they had to, if they wanted to eat something, they had to go out and get it and then hunt it. And, sometimes they came back empty-handed, and maybe the whole family or the whole clan couldn't eat something for a week. So people actually, during our evolution, were in and out of ketosis very, very often. I don't know if there are any estimates, but I would guess probably they were in ketosis half the time at least. And actually, I'm not 100% sure if your viewers all know what I mean when I say ketosis. Maybe I should explain that.
No, go ahead and explain it. And let me tell you, keto is a hot topic, but it's difficult for kidney patients because of what we do find on the internet. It's the bacon diet and things like that. Bacon and cheese, woohoo, lose weight, which is not good for us.
Yeah. So essentially being in ketosis is the opposite of, what most people's lifestyle is, right? So if you eat, start eating with breakfast, you have lunch, you have dinner, you have lots and lots of snacks in between and a late night snack, and it's all carbohydrate rich food, which is, what you go to the grocery store, that's what's there. Your blood sugar always stays high, and you have just too many carbohydrates, and which translates to too much sugar. What the body does is the body thinks, oh, it's a time of plenty. I'm supposed to take all that sugar and dump it into my fat tissue, right? So all the sugar gets converted to fat and put into the fat tissue, which means, people start ballooning and start becoming overweight, start becoming
especially
obese.
Around the liver, right? Your liver collects fat.
The liver as well, yeah. So there is the fat tissue, and then there's also the liver, and the liver also happily soaks up all these carbs and says, hey, I don't need carbs right now. I need to store it for a rainy day and put it on into fat, and that's how you get a fatty liver disease. And we humans, we're supposed to not live in plentiful situations every day of the year, right? Because then there is, there's those times where we don't have food, and then that's when we can release all these fats and live off of that again, so we get skinny again. So it has to go, in and out.
So I'm just storing up for the day that food's not available.
Exactly, right, yeah. So, which means, and that period, of fasting, essentially, that's when our body just changes over to fat metabolism, and that's called ketosis. And the reason why it's called ketosis is because the fats are partially converted to what's called ketones. So the liver actually takes all these fats and kind of breaks them into smaller chunks. They're called ketones. And one of them is called beta hydroxybutyrate, or BHB, and that kind of then circulates through for the blood system, and all the cells in the body can gobble up all these ketones and burn them for energy. That's where the name ketosis comes from.
And you're the founder and president of Santa Barbara Nutrients, and you have a product, correct, that can help people get into ketosis and stay there.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we found in our research was, I've mentioned all these dietary changes, but we can put mice on a reduced food intake regimen, we can put them on a ketogenic diet, and we wanted to test whether, just supplementing them with this ketone BHB or beta hydroxybutyrate, if that alone already has any beneficial effects. So did the experiment, we give them a BHB in the drinking water just on top of the regular rodent chow. And interestingly, a little bit to my surprise, this was actually could actually mimic many of the beneficial effects of nutritional ketosis, by just changing the diet. So that was pretty striking. So essentially, you take a rat with polycystic kidney disease, you don't change their food, you just add this ketone in the drinking water, and it was highly beneficial. So that was something, that might mean maybe it is not necessary even for patients to be on such a strict diet, because at the end of the day, very few people can really stick with this for years and years and years.
Yeah.
If it were possible to just take this ketone and have many of the beneficial effects, that would be, of course, a huge advantage. So we did many more experiments, and we of course are trying to understand all the molecular pathways in the lab, what exactly is going on, which receptor is activated, or does it have something to do with mitochondria and so on. And but in the meantime, I thought, okay, what I would normally do as a professor is, I publish a paper in the academic literature and then move on to the next thing. And what then typically happens is nothing, right? So there's nothing gets translated necessarily for anyone's benefit. So we decided to actually just do it rather than nothing happening. So we launched a company. We actually got a patent through UCSB. So my university got a patent on this whole idea of using BHB in addition to another compound, and we can talk about citric acid or citrate. And we formulated this product as what's called a medical food. So it's essentially a food because all the ingredients are food ingredients, but it's not not like an ordinary food. It's not like bread and butter and
Right.
yogurt. So it's actually for a specific medical purpose for people with a disease, with a metabolic defect, which is what polycystic kidney disease is. And so we were able to formulate this and put this out and manufacture it actually. And essentially it is a, it's a powder. It kind of looks like that. It's a powder thing.
Uh-huh.
You scoop it into a glass of water and drink it. So it contains this ketone beta hydroxybutyrate. And it's combined with what's called citrate, and which is a whole nother mechanism that we discovered in our lab. And it contains some electrolytes that are meant to be further supportive in the nutritional management of the disease, and that includes calcium, magnesium, and potassium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like an all-round package, if you will, that supports sort of the nutrition of people with PKD. And it's not a drug. And I always try to tell this to people because everybody kind of wants a magic bullet.
Right.
So
we all wish, but
right.
it takes a while. We realize there is no magic silver bullet. So
Right.
it's a medical food.
Right. Yes. And, so one can take it by itself, but, we always highly recommend to combine this with dietary changes and sort of lifestyle changes along those lines we've talked about. The hope is that it will support people so that they don't have to be necessarily on this very, very strict type of diet that we talked about, which is, every time Halloween comes around, you get thrown off the bus, thrown off the bandwagon there again.
I remember that exact Halloween, that moment. I love being the best house in the neighborhood. And we had movie size, the giant candy bars. Not just full size. We had the giant ones. And we were giving them out. And I remember sitting there like, oh, that Hershey bar sitting there next to me was calling my name. I'm like, what's wrong with a little bit? I have a little bit. Then now you opened it. Might as well eat a little more. Oh, what's half of it going to do sitting there? All of a sudden, I'm like, oh my goodness, I fell off the wagon. and I never got back on. I wish there was a product like this that I knew about that could have helped me stay in ketosis. Because then once I got off, I couldn't get back in ketosis, and I just kind of gave up.
Right. Yeah.
Even though I was probably 6 months on the keto diet.
That's long. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
lost like 70 or 80 pounds. Oh my goodness, it
wow,
was awesome.
excellent. Yeah.
I found it though.
Yeah. And so the other part of this medical food is what I mentioned is citrate, and that's actually I think just as interesting as kind of from a science perspective, because it turns out that our kidneys, they do a lot of work and they have all kinds of different functions. And of course, one function is, they filter all the fluid, and they have to concentrate all the fluid so that we don't lose, lots and lots of water all day long. And during this concentration, many substances don't like to stay in solution, but they like to just precipitate and fall out and form crystals. And you have heard of kidney stones, of course, and that's
Oh my
exactly
goodness, yes. I had
where
them
they come
once,
from.
never again. Once was
Good,
one time
yes,
too many.
right. Yeah, and where kidney stones actually come from are these tiny microcrystals that can precipitate in the kidney. And over time they can aggregate, they can grow larger and larger, and when they get stuck in there. And that's what you don't want as a kidney. And what a kidney uses to prevent this is this molecule called citrate, which is essentially just citric acid, which people use for cooking, for baking. Citric acid is everywhere. So it's a very simple, food ingredient, if you will. It's a very common food ingredient. And citric acid just prevents the formation of many of these types of crystals. That's kind of the natural defense of the kidney. Turns out that in people with polycystic kidney disease, and actually also in CKD, that the citrate levels are too low in the urine. So our kidneys can't defend themselves well enough. And consequently, in people with PKD, kidney stones are very common. And those with kidney stones, they also have worse disease progression. And we actually discovered, some of these mechanisms where these microcrystals can cause injury in these kidneys that triggers more and more cyst growth and worse progression over time. And this can be antagonized by giving, again, animals with PKD by giving them citrate. And you do this in a way also where the pH of the urine can be adjusted, because that's also too low in people with polycystic kidney disease. So that's kind of all formulated in this medical food as sort of an alkalinizing effect, to antagonize the acidic pH, as well as providing more citrate to raise the urine citrate levels back to normal levels. Yeah.
That is amazing. Now, we have a few questions I want to pop in here that are related to what we've been talking about. My mom asked, how do you get this product?
Oh, okay. It's you just go to our website. So it's actually been on the market only since November. So mid-November is when we started. We were ready. So it's the Santa Barbara Nutrients website.
Let's see if I can bring it up here. There we are.
Oh,
there it
you found
is.
it. All right. Perfect. Yeah. So it's called KetoCitra. It's essentially our only product currently. Oh, there it is. We have a few miscellaneous items. For example, we have this pH indicator paper that you can get there as well. It's really, really cheap, but I think very helpful to monitor the urine pH. Because that lets you, number one, realize, it's way too acidic. And then you can keep monitoring it as you change your diet and add this medical food to it, to kind of like tighter things into a more neutral level.
And
Yeah,
will Will Medicaid or Medicare pay for it?
Unfortunately, currently not. There's no reimbursement yet. That's something I'm really hoping we can change over time. Realistically, it's going to take time. So we're, of course, we're planning to do clinical trials to, measure the outcomes of the entire Renew program, actually, this dietary program, which also incorporates this medical food, KetoCitra. And I'm fairly convinced that we will see pretty strong beneficial effects there. But it has to be documented. Right? You can't just, health insurance companies are not just going to take our word for it. They will want to see the data, and that makes sense. And I don't think many of them would reimburse anything until they have those data and we have published it and people start accepting it. So I would say currently people that are sort of like pioneers that are starting with this, and hopefully over time this becomes more and more accepted and can then be reimbursed.
Yep. And darn it, what was it? I just had a question. Wait, I think the question was asked by, hold on. I just had a great question for you. Oh, the stages. So people are actually already looking at the website, which there's a link in the description. I'll pop it back up on the screen again right here for the Santa Barbara Nutrients.com website. And so is this recommended for stages 1 through 3 only?
Yes. So currently we recommend it for stages 1 through 3. With the reason being that, once you're in stage 4 or 5, things change, of course. Everything kind of changes, right? So the electrolyte handling, some people may not tolerate potassium as much as anymore, for example. So in those cases, it's really up to the doctor to say, okay, you're stage 4, but you can still take this. And in fact, as a medical food, that's one of the rules of medical foods is that they are to be taken under medical supervision. So they're not the same as supplements. Supplements and medical foods are two different categories that are regulated both by the FDA, but they're different categories. Supplements are intended for healthy people. Medical foods are intended for people with a certain disease. So it's to be taken under medical supervision. So it's usually, it will be ultimately up to the doctor to say, it's appropriate for you, or, hey, you have another medical issue, maybe it's not appropriate for you. So it's very important for everyone to check that out first.
Yep. And Sandra has a question that's on my mind. So could CKD patients possibly benefit from this? Not just those with polycystic kidney disease?
I think so, and that's actually one of the sort of important, things we would like to, do a lot more work on. Is what other types of chronic kidney disease can benefit from this. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the progression of chronic kidney disease is really the same, no matter where the initial trigger came from, whether it's diabetes, hypertension, polycystic kidney disease. So we would, and there's lots of data actually that would suggest that the same approaches should be doing the same things, no matter what type of chronic kidney disease one has. There's, for example, already plenty of data out there that plant-focused diets are very beneficial in, and you have talked about this on your show.
Oh, yeah.
Times.
And with that's Jess and with all the other dietitians. Everyone is 100% on board with a plant-based diet.
Right.
And for me, I am very much plant-based, not 100%, but I am far more plant-based than I used to be. In the olden days before kidney disease, the only plants were toppings on my pizza or toppings on a hamburger. Right. Now my plate is mostly plant, and maybe there's a little bit of chicken or something on the side.
Right. Good. Perfect. Yeah. So that's why I think essentially anyone with any form of CKD will most likely have the same, benefits from everything we do in the whole Renew program, as well as the medical foods there as well.
Yeah. Now, Nancy asks a great question. I believe I know the answer to this. She asks, is this covered by FSA plans? Do you know?
We're working on this right now. It's been a bit of a nightmare to do all the paperwork needed for that. I think very soon we'll get this done. There's HSA, FSA.
Yep.
It takes some some tweaking on the payment part there, which I don't understand how this all works, but we have terrific people on the team that are sorting this all out. So I
Yeah.
would say pretty soon.
I love using my HSA account, and I've purchased things that are classified as medical foods, and I've never had an issue with
Right.
them being covered. Whenever I do have something that I purchase that isn't covered, never has it been a medical food, I just call up my HSA and I explain it to them, and boom, they'll put it in the computer and they always say the same thing. We'll make an exception this time. This time is every time I call them.
Nice. That's actually great to know. Okay, perfect.
Hey, I have no problem either calling up a company and saying, hey, you got any coupons so I can save some money on this product, or calling up my HSA or my insurance and say, hey, I bought this. You need to cover it.
Right.
Let's see if there's any other questions. Only got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to go through some of the other questions. Someone had asked earlier in the show, sorry, Philip, for taking so long to get to your question. Is there protein leakage for people who have PKD?
Yes, it's very similar to any other form of CKD. The further along one is in the progression, there's a higher chance of proteinuria. Yes, and that's of course measured by the doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone else asked, do you have to stay on a keto diet for the rest of your life? So is that something that would be good for people who have PKD to just do keto forever?
Right. I mean, it's, obviously there's no long-term data at all. Currently, there's a few clinical trials that have started. So I'm involved in one of them in Germany. It's the University of Cologne, that's really run by the nephrologist there, Dr. Roman Müller, who's absolutely terrific. Those data will come out later this year, but it's only a 3-month trial. So longer term studies, will have to be done. And of course, they will take longer, much, much longer. So currently, I think nobody can really answer that question. I think in general, maybe it doesn't have to be necessarily a ketogenic diet, right? So as you mentioned, low carb can be beneficial, maybe much easier to do. Intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, they're all kind of like variations on the theme that can help there.
And Audrey asked I think a funny question, though a serious question. And I think I know the answer, and I don't think she's going to like the answer. But if she's taking KetoCitra and she's on a keto diet, can you eat candy?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if you say yes, oh my goodness, everyone's going to be so happy, but I have a feeling you're going to say no.
What you could potentially do, there's actually a sweetener in here, and it's not sugar, of course, it's actually stevia. Maybe somebody could come up with a recipe how to turn this into candy, which I would love to know how to do that.
There you go. There you go.
There's a challenge there.
Let's see. Well, we are now at the top of the hour. Holy cow, that time went by so quick. Let me see if there's any other last question that came in. I don't see any other ones. Lots of great comments. We have a number of people in the audience who have used or are using the product, which is great. And there were some positive comments. Someone from one of your studies was here, Captain Steve.
Oh,
he was in your beta testing. Woohoo! Hey, great having you here, Captain Steve. All right. It is the top of the hour, and we have to put an end to our show. Oh, but it was so great having you here, Doc, and talking to you. I'm sure you'll be back and we could talk more about this. this is a product that, especially if it can help people stay in ketosis, the weight loss, being able to lose weight, good for your heart, good for your blood pressure. To me, I see those benefits and I'm excited about it. But looking forward to learning more about it. I want to thank everyone in the audience. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up. Thumbs ups help the video get recommended to other kidney patients, especially those with PKD, because I don't create a lot of videos discussing PKD. As a matter of fact, there's not a lot of them out there on the internet that are helpful. So it'd be great. Give the video a thumbs up so that they can find this. And this is the last video that's on the schedule for the week. I might come back on some night and do a little hangout with all the subscribers and stuff. But I will be back next week. I've got Dr. Rosansky and Jen. I think, maybe. I can't remember. The schedule's on Dadvice TV, everybody. All right. Thank you, Doc, and thank all of you. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.
Bye.